Erin,
Hi,
hello.
everyone. Hello.
Sorry, we
And
ran out a little bit of time, but the floor is all yours.
all right. Thank you so much. And hello, I see Deepak said hello. So hello, and thank you all for having me. I'm going to share my screen here. Okay, just give me one moment to switch things around. Okay. Are you able to see my screen without all of the stuff on the sides?
No,
You just see worker rights, or?
no, I don't see your screen at all just now.
Oh, right, I need to actually press share. 1 second. I just assumed it would all do it for me. Share screen, here we go.
There we go, perfect. Yes,
Okay.
here we
All
are.
right. Let me just actually switch things around. I have 2 screens going on here. Okay, technology. Now can you see the screen without all of the stuff on the sides?
Yes.
Just the presentation, perfect. All right. So thank you so much for having me here today. It's Friday night. I am downtown Toronto speaking about worker rights and cannabis. So it doesn't get much wilder than that. Thanks for having me. So for those of you who don't know me, I am an HR leader. I've worked in cannabis for several years now. I actually came to the cannabis space after my own medical experience with cannabis. I had a traumatic medical event, and I essentially used cannabis to rehabilitate myself back to work. And so based on my previous expertise with worker rights, I mean, I found the rehabilitation from a workplace perspective really fascinating. But I automatically thought, you know, just intuitively how closely connected cannabis was to worker rights. So when I first started working in cannabis, I was actually working with private organizations to do workplace impairment education. And as well, I quickly discovered there was systemic discrimination in policies. And then my next move was to actually educate on worker rights here in the cannabis industry. Earlier in today, I heard several great comments from other panelists, something along the lines of how important it is for us to celebrate culture and have strong culture in our workplaces. And the diversity and inclusion panel was also especially fascinating, and how worker rights really ties in with everything is that it's the basic of diversity and inclusion. Like we can't like pass go, so to speak. You have to get worker rights down first. So that's a bit about what I'm all about. So I have a poll. Let me just see if I now that I'm sharing my screen, I no longer. Roman, are you able to launch that poll for me? Is that possible? My let me see here. Things are. Oh. Oh, here we go. Okay. So, can you see the? I'm not sure if you're able to see the question yet, but okay, you can. Perfect. So my question for you is, who here is able to tell me what the name of the patient was that appealed to the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, so that we have the right to legally medicate with cannabis in July of 2000. So I'm going to give you a moment to answer that. Doesn't look like anybody's answering. Okay, so that's okay. I'll tell you the answer then. I was hoping for a little of engagement, but that's okay. So his name was Terry Parker, and I'm going to play a brief video for you here so that you're able to learn a little bit more about this.
Decisions made. Too far.
All right. So I will send out the link for that video just in case it was, I'm guessing it may have been choppy. So I'll send out the link for that. The reason why I bring this up is it's really important, not for you just to know your rights as you work in cannabis, but to really understand the roots of what makes cannabis so special. So really, you know, the story of Terry Parker was that he was had unsuccessful he had no success treating his epileptic seizures, and he fought for his right to legally medicate with cannabis. So knowing our roots of fighting for our rights is important, so that that again is the spirit of the industry. And by understanding that, as you go into jobs, maybe leadership positions, then you're able to understand this as you make decisions on policy. And how they could impact marginalized groups. So I'm not going to do like a legal breakdown today at all, but I'm actually going to be doing a bit of a mishmash of rights. But it is really important for you to know kind of the breakdown of what I'm talking about with worker rights. Worker rights is a very broad topic. So I'm taking a mishmash of health and safety and human rights. And I just want to just say for a moment that because I'm sharing my screen, I'm unable to see all the chat comments. So any questions I'll get to afterwards. So it's important for you to know, you know, before you start your job, that there is health and safety legislation and human rights legislation, and it's very similar across provinces, but there are variations. Under the Health and Safety Act, you've got protections for bullying and harassment, workplace violence, and health and safety, of course. And then under human rights, this is around discriminatory protections based on protected grounds. And there's some connection with harassment, and I'm drawing out some focus to workplace accommodation. So my goal today is for you to have the high levels, for you to be able to remove employment barriers, navigate dangerous situations, and to be able to report bullying and harassment. So because I can't see the chat feature, I'm actually going to just skip that question. So here is a range of protected grounds. Again, it could vary based on your province, but it's important to understand what these protected grounds are for two reasons. One, so you can, again, know your rights. But two, this snapshot of protected grounds gives you kind of a basis to understand what's referred to as intersectionality. So, you know, because you, as a worker, you have your own rights and how you're protected, but also how you interact with others on the job can have impacts on them. So intersectionality really tells us that, you know, based on your lived experiences, how you experience discrimination varies based on who you are. So my experience with discrimination as a queer disabled woman would be different than that of a queer disabled Black woman. And then I have a record of offenses in gray down there, because what I find fascinating about cannabis is that with record of offenses, you know, some roles, of course, require security clearance, but this is the first industry I've worked in where there's an actual advocacy push for us to employ people who have previous possession charges and people from the legacy market. So that's really important for you to understand. Again, as a person working in cannabis, I'd love to see as many people as possible advocating for expungements moving forward. So here's the breakdown of workplace accommodation. So again, we're talking about removing barriers. So any of the protected grounds that are covered with your province means that if you are going through an experience where for one reason or another, you're unable to do your job effectively, there's an opportunity to remove that barrier. So for example, if we had an employee with a chronic mental health condition, if they're repeatedly late for their weekly therapy because of an overlapping meeting, there would be an opportunity for us to change the circumstances so that this person can get their therapy and participate in employment. So in this circumstance, whether it's this or a different type of barrier, this is typically what accommodation looks like. So what you want to do is you want to notify either your leader or your HR department that you have a barrier. You don't have to tell them everything about your medical decision, your medical circumstances, if it happens to be medical. Your leader or the HR person should get back to you in a reasonable time frame. They could reach out for more information. They are definitely going to document things, so that's something you should know. In the event that it's a more complex medical circumstance, we could be pulling in doctors, for example. This is, again, it's a very complex process, and I'm only showing you it just so you can see what a standard process looks like. With more complex cases, there could be an accommodation plan. And accommodation is something that could be long-term or could be for a short period of time. So just know that if you're apprehensive to documentation, that it is common, but confidentiality is a core principle. Quickly on health and safety. I'm not going to focus on this from an industrial perspective because I think that people who have worked in industrial sectors for a long time are familiar with health and safety rights. But this really expands beyond just industrial sectors. Earlier today we saw an example of somebody who showed inappropriate behavior in a virtual environment. So this is common. It's common for PR roles, customer service roles, but essentially it is your right to know what the hazards are. So your employer isn't supposed to just have a policy. They're supposed to be, determining what hazards exist, not just from an industrial perspective, but also regarding workplace violence. It's your right to participate in health and safety programs. You can join the committee if you'd like. And something that is really relevant right now is your right to refuse. So COVID-19, for example, is a workplace hazard. So your right to refuse is very relevant right now. And there's a process that that I can send out if you'd like it, but it's typically spelled out. But generally, you notify your employer that of a hazardous situation. They look into it, and then if it's resolved, then you can go back on the job. And if it's not, there could be further steps to take. So right to refuse is really relevant, and it's also relevant to workplace violence. I'm almost at the end of my slides. I know we started a little late, so I'm trying to talk as quickly as I can. So on the topic of harassment,
take your time. You have
okay. I'm like going
time.
super fast. I can talk quick to begin with, but I'm going quick here. Okay, so. So on the topic of harassment, bullying, and violence, this is a range of behaviors. And I bring up the subtle to explicit for a couple of reasons. Earlier, Natasha brought up the topic of microaggressions. And I think that people who don't often experience oppression really underestimate how harmful repeated subtle behavior, harmless jokes, and unwanted flirting or misgendering a person. People really underestimate how traumatic that can be for people who have lived experience with oppression. So all of these examples are important, and they're all worthy of an incident report if you feel that's necessary. And on that topic, what you should expect from a new employer is a much more expanded version of this talk. You should have a policy in place for all of these things, but not just a statement of intention, but actual procedures. So in the event that domestic violence enters into the workplace, how do you handle that? Or in the event that that you are harassed? Like, what's the investigation procedure? So that should be very clear. There should be education and, of course, support in place. The last thing I'll leave you with here is, in the event that the unthinkable happens, here are a few things that I think you should do. So the unthinkable can mean many things. It can mean that you've actually been assaulted, or it can mean that you have launched a complaint and it wasn't taken seriously. So my recommendations is, of course, for you to practice self-care, to surround yourself with support systems, to line up your documentation for your own legal purposes, to report it if you haven't done so. And in the event that your incident report hasn't been taken seriously, there are escalation options. There is a handout that I have shared with CanMar. It should be sent out, and it will give you a breakdown of the different provincial bodies for both health and safety and human rights. So it is within your right to inquire about your rights of the legislation, or what you should do in this case. And it's also within your right to lodge a complaint if your incident report or investigation wasn't taken seriously. So that is the express version of worker rights. And of course, if your company needs this type of education, I'd be happy to give you the full briefing, but that is it for today. So is there any questions? Any questions or comments? Should I open up the chat feature, or let me see here? How much time do I have, Roman?
No, you have 5, 6, 7 minutes for answering questions. Definitely.
Oh wow. Okay. I'm looking at the time here. I'm way off the time schedule.
No, it's all good, because we had you a little bit late as well.
Okay.
Thank you for this presentation. Well, with my HR background as well, I'm obviously find it really really interesting. The right to refuse, with COVID, I did think about this.
Yeah. And I think it's a really important point, right? Because I mean, it's a biohazardous hazard, so to speak. So I think that a lot of employers in cannabis have been talking about. I'm part of a larger HR community here in Ontario, and so it's really great to hear how many organizations have been taking this seriously right from the beginning. But I think that's great in theory, but the reality of the situation is that, I mean, I live downtown Toronto, so I know that when I walk outside, a lot of people are not really taking it seriously. I live right next to Trinity Bellwoods, so I've seen it all. So I think that it's very possible that we can see procedures put in place right now, but that as time goes on, although we're still in a pandemic, things can loosen. So if you ever find yourself in a position where you feel unsafe from a COVID perspective or otherwise, then you have every right to ask questions, present your facts of what you know about COVID-19 and PPE, and have those conversations. Is there anything you would add, Roman?
Have you? Well, I was going to say, have you heard of any case of a dismissal because of a right to refuse work, because of COVID right now, or because it's very relevant?
I'll be honest with you. I haven't. I thought I would. I personally know of people who work in like rural Ontario industrial sectors, who had expressed significant concerns. I think a reality, and perhaps this might not be the case broadly in cannabis, but in other sectors, one of the big dangers that I've seen is as companies and corporations have reduced budgets, hand washing stations have been taken away, and just people are not actually abiding by general safety practices. So as soon as COVID hit, those people were like, well, if this is where we're at now, how much worse is it going to get? So I do know of people who expressed their concerns prior to a layoff or a temporary layoff due to COVID shutdown, who have become permanently laid off, which is, you can't really say for sure, but this is why these things are so important, to document the conversations that you're having with your leaders, and in the event that you think you've been unfairly dismissed, you have every right to get legal representation or to reach out to the Ministry of Labor or whatnot. So sorry, long answer to say no, I don't know about it, but I wouldn't be surprised if I heard about it at some point, which is unfortunate.
Fair enough. Yeah. Well, I was looking at the chat, and I believe workers need more awareness. How would you how would you reach the employees, that have concern about all this, about again, wrongful dismissal, harassment, right to refuse work, all these kind of things?
Yeah, how would I? So I'm not sure I understand the question.
Gary was saying that they need workers need more awareness.
Oh yeah, I mean, one great way of spreading awareness is to encourage your employers to hire me, so I could come in and not talk 100 miles a minute when I'm but I mean I would say that in your workplaces, if you want to talk about hazards, then you should encourage those conversations. I've been a person who's had many workers over the years in and out of cannabis, who have reached out to me. I'm the HR person that people come to saying, hey, this really kind of weird thing that doesn't make sense is happening at work. Is this legal? What should I do? So I'm not sure I'm answering the question right, but definitely hire me to to educate your teams or write inclusive policy.
That's awesome. Thank you. Very inspirational chat. Definitely, we're definitely going to share your details to all our companies, panelists, and attendees that have been here all day. So thank you so much for joining.
You're welcome.
Thank you for staying on some of the presentation.
Oh man, I loved every moment. I loved being able to put all the pieces together. It's been really great. And if there are any questions that I didn't answer, or anything that I spoke too quickly through, please reach out to me. I'd be happy to chat further.
Thank you so much, Erin.
You're welcome. Next session is going to be awesome. I'll be there. Okay, bye.
Right. Have a great evening.
Yeah, you too.
Bye.